Everyone, it is 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. This is the fifth Hack Hotshot of 2013. And today we're with Gianni Gnezza from Zug in Switzerland.
Hi, Henry, and hi, everybody.
Hi, Gianni. Gianni's going to be talking about advanced industrial espionage attacks. Okay, and let's just get on with it. Gianni, if you can start your presentation whenever you're ready.
Okay. So.
Excellent. That looks great.
So, well.
Perfect. Oh, yeah.
Can I start?
Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Perfectly well. Go ahead.
Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Gianni Gnezza. I am an IT security consultant. I work for P3 Security, a company based in Zug, Switzerland, where I do vulnerability research, exploit development, malware analysis, and penetration testing from time to time. And today I would like to talk about industrial espionage attacks. So in the next 10 to 15 minutes, the agenda is divided into 4 parts: industrial espionage, some famous cases, the anatomy of an attack, and then we'll give you a couple of tips to minimize the damage that these attacks can do. So let's start with the definition of industrial espionage. Industrial espionage is the theft or trade secrets by the removal, copying, or recording of confidential or valuable information in a company for use by a competitor. In some cases, can be used also for by governments to assess the risks or to understand better what other countries are doing. Back in 2012, when I gave this presentation for the first time, I tried to find some numbers to show how much money is lost due to these kind of attacks, and I didn't find much except a couple of statistics from the ncix.gov and the iwar.org.uk. The oldest value that I found was 45 billion in 1999, lost by the Fortune 1000, and in 2002 those 45 billion went up to 300 billion, and apparently they raised again in 2011 when the ncix.gov released a report that says the losses from economic espionage go up to 400 billion or more a year. So this is just to show you that industrial espionage it's a growing threat, and all the actors involved in the security of a company should be aware of the risk of attacks. So some famous cases. Back in 2012, I went to look for some famous cases. I found the Microsoft versus Oracle case, where Oracle employed the Investigative Group International to look into the actions of Microsoft. And I found also another interesting case was the GhostNet case, where a vast surveillance system was discovered by Canadian researchers. It was actually a very sophisticated software that was used to control several governmental organizations, and apparently those secrets were sent. The secrets stolen from those organizations were sent to China. Now, I didn't want to talk too much about these cases because they are 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. So I went to look for some new stuff, and I found some interesting cases. For example, at the end of June 2012, an article was published in the register.co.uk about a very interesting worm that was used to compromise companies in Peru and steal AutoCAD projects from those companies and send them back to China. So this is the state of the art of industrial espionage. Then few days ago, another interesting case, the Red October campaign, the Kaspersky Sky Lab just released a very interesting report that I suggest you that I invite you to read. It shows really how the software is not, the malicious software is not anymore developed by kids in their garage, but developed by a team of very expert malicious developers. So all the countries affected are the one in red, so you can see it really, it's spread all around the world. Now, having said that, let's move on to the presentation, to the anatomy of an attack. So back in 2012, we analyzed a case of industrial espionage, and we were able to figure out how the attacker got in and how he was able to do what he did. So now I would like to show you the step by step what he did. And of course, before I go any further, let me say that IPs, username, hostname, etc. have been changed or removed. The screenshots and pictures come from my lab and or the computer or the internet. And of course, no information about the victim is going to be released in the next few slides. So having said that, let's move on and take a look at the methodology that we, you know, in these few years that we decided to go into this IT security business, we saw several cases of industrial espionage, and we developed this unofficial methodology. This unofficial methodology is basically the 5 steps that every attacker or almost every attacker uses. The first one is to break into the network or the facility. Second, locate the information. Third, copy or record everything you can or everything you want. Fourth, leave the network or the facility with your information. And the fifth, get rich or get caught. So this methodology is very interesting because, as you can see, if the company is aware of the risks, they can actually put in place some defenses for each step. For example, if you defend your network, you can avoid that. You can minimize the risk to being hacked. In case somebody gets into your network, you can minimize the risk installing something to monitorize if the attacker is trying to locate the information, the sensitive information in your network. And so you can minimize the risk installing or training the staff for each step. Now let me go into let me be more specific. The XYZ company is a medium-sized company, and it has a network that looks pretty much like in the diagram that you see. The internet is divided in 3 parts: the LAN 1, LAN 2, and LAN 3. In LAN 3, you have a website and a database. It's a standard DMZ. Then in LAN 1, you have a couple of workstations that we don't care. And in LAN 2, we have several Windows 7 workstations, a couple of printers, and some servers. Now, for this attack, the only important actors are the client, the Windows 7 client, the printer, and these 4 servers. The servers are Windows Server 2008 and Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6. And there was also a CentOS 5.6. So the XYZ company is aware of the risk of the internet. They handle very sensitive information, so they perform penetration tests regularly. Their network perimeter was pretty much it was secure. Their website was apparently had no vulnerabilities, and the staff at XYZ was trained to recognize social engineering attacks. So it looked really a pretty solid company. Unfortunately, when the staff was trained to recognize social engineering attacks, was not really trained properly, because the attacker used a very advanced social engineering attack, but something that was avoidable. Anyway, the attack was simple. One of the employees of the department that you saw, where you saw the, excuse me, one of the employee went to visit a website that was indicated by the attacker in a reply to a post in a website similar to Craigslist. So once the victim visited the website of the attacker was able to exploit a very interesting vulnerability. To do that, the attacker created a dynamic exploit delivery page with several client-side exploits. He used more than 10 exploits. If I remember correctly, were 12, because the company is a high-profile company, and they perform penetration testing regularly. So I guess the attacker believed the company is pretty secure. So he used around 12 client-side exploits, and one of them was successful, was the MS-12-037 exploit. This exploit exploits a vulnerability in Internet Explorer, and he used that to get into the network. So step 1, get into the network. Step 2, locate the information. Once the attacker was in the network, he used this compromised machine to locate it. And he didn't know much about the network, so he used several sniffers and other tools to locate the main server. In this case, he found the application servers down here, the SQL server, and the document storage server. But he didn't, at the beginning, he didn't know about the backup server, because the backup server was in a different IP range. So once he found these 3 servers, he tried to get into the servers from the compromised Windows 7 machine. As I said before, the XYZ company is pretty secure, so the attacker was unable to get access to any of the servers because there were no vulnerabilities. They were fully patched, and every server in the network had a different password, so he couldn't find a way to get in. So few days later, because the attack took about 2 weeks, few days later, he looked for other interesting targets, and he decided to attack the printer. Now, at that time, I was not aware of any attack or of any vulnerabilities, but several techniques were published and were released at DEF CON 18, I believe, that show us how to attack printers. In this case, the attacker used a very interesting technique. You know, multifunctional printers have several features like remote functionality, LDAP support, syslogin, backup, etc. Well, in this case, the attacker used a slash to bypass the login page, and believe it or not, this is a vulnerability that affects Toshiba printers, or well, maybe at least in the past. And when you bypass the login page, if you go to the setup/network/settings/smb.htm page, you will see that the password is in the HTML source code. So the attacker was able to get the administrator password through the printer and then use it to attack the other machine. In this case, he used the password from the Toshiba printer to get into the application server, the Windows Server 2008. That was the only server that was using the same password, because as I said before, in this company they have a very strong password policy, so there are no other servers with the same password. It's not allowed to use the same password. Having said that, the attacker used the password to get into the application server, and from the application server, he got the credential for the database, and he used the SQL Server Management Studio tools to access the SQL server. But unfortunately, no valuable information were stored in the SQL server. So I guess at that point he was quite disappointed, but it's not finished. The documents, the diagrams, the project, etc. were all stored in the Linux file server. And the Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6 was up to date and apparently not vulnerable to any known attack. So the attacker had to find another way to get the data, and we think that he was able to discover the backup server thanks to a note of the administrator in the store in the SQL server. So after a week, more or less, the attacker knew about the backup server, and unfortunately, the backup server was not updated and was not, was not in the same IP range. So nobody really took care about it. And the backup server had several possible entry points. In this case, the attacker used a PHP MyAdmin 3.41 SWIKI-RC remote control execution exploit to get a remote shell on the backup server. This vulnerability is quite interesting because it's a vulnerability in a PHP file in the install directory. So if you install PHP MyAdmin properly, that vulnerability shouldn't be there. Anyway, the attacker got into the backup server, and then he used the umount exploit to get a root shell. From there, well, that was easy. Once he was in the backup server, he had a root access and access to all the files and directories on the system. The most valuable documents were compressed in several tar.gz files, and he used the SBD utility to send this file through HTTPS to a compromised host in Malaysia. Now, during the investigation, we tried to contact these guys and talk to them, but they were not so open to discussion. So this is the diagram of what happened. The attacker got into the network through an exploit delivery page. He attacked this Windows 7 machine. From the Windows 7 machine, he went to the backup server, and then from the backup server, he used this SBD utility to get the data out of this network. The data, well, several sensitive documents, contracts, diagrams, pictures, etc. were stolen, including a couple actually of original signatures that they were used in in documents, and these signatures was apparently what attracted the attention of the bank, because a few weeks later the malicious attacker tried to send money directly into a foreign bank account using the stolen signature. The stolen signature came from one of the employees of this company, and when the bank detected this suspicious request, they denied the transfer and they contacted the company, and the company only at that point discovered that somebody broke into their network. So we believe that this was because after they stole the information, they did not find somebody to sell this information. So I guess probably the attacker or one of the attackers tried to get some money through the bank. Countermeasures. Well, usually at this point, people are waiting for a magical solution to all the problems. Well, I don't have that solution, but I can give you some very useful tips. First of all, well, update your software and perform penetration tests and vulnerability assessment regularly. Second, it's very important to use all the tools that can allow us to detect this kind of intrusion as soon as possible as soon as possible. So use SIEM technology, use security information and event management tools. I listed a couple of them in the slides without any, not in a specific order. Although I can say, I can tell you that HP ArcSight is very popular among banks. And well, third point, in the attack, the attacker was able to get the information from the backup server to the internet. Well, that shouldn't be allowed. Internal servers should not have access to the internet. If you are a network administrator, you must isolate valuable assets. It should be very, very hard for an attacker to get the data from your internal server to his computer out in the internet. And fourth, train your staff. In this case, we had the attacker used an exploit that was not a 0-day, and that exploit was not detected by the intrusion detection system, and was not detected because the intrusion detection system was set up by an external that probably didn't know much about attacks, I guess. Well, and with that, I would like to leave you with the following quote. If an attacker wants to get inside your network, he will, and there is nothing you can do about it. The only thing you can do is make it harder for him to get in. Do you have any question?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gianni. That was absolutely brilliant. A lot of really great information there. Especially, a couple of just a couple of quick points that it's pretty interesting that $400 billion you said is the amount of theft which is going on last year, and also all of the information about printers is very. I mean that's fundamental fit for every organization to understand. So really great information. There are a couple of questions. First question is your thoughts towards beacons. The question is, do you think companies should plant beacons of false information, rather like email honeypots, and therefore backtrack and discover information that relates to the location of the hackers? Or do you think that is a bad idea to give false information because that can lead to revenge attacks?
That's I'm trying to be objective, and I personally believe that a company should not attack anybody else. I mean, we should try to avoid that approach. But I would not exclude the use of honeypots and all of those tools, which are very important. Personally, I think every company should have a honeypot, at least one, because it doesn't cost too much, and it's an easy way to detect something that is abnormal.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the main thing an SME company, a small company, medium-sized company, can do to protect against espionage? You actually spoke about that in your presentation. You said that you gave us some tips, but the question goes on to say, would banning BYOD and social engineering training be the best protection?
Well, social engineering trainings are definitely a good way to avoid a lot of attacks. I mean, in the October campaign, Red October campaign,
right,
the attackers were able to compromise several organizations and companies and networks through phishing attacks. So I think really the offensive security is moving toward the client-side exploits, and in order to get a user, in order to get the click of a user, they need to be able to attract the user somehow. So if you teach to the user all the skills necessary to detect something that is abnormal, well, maybe we can minimize the risk to being compromised.
Okay. And the third question, which relates, I guess, to the last one, is, would you agree that social engineering is the biggest threat to today's corporate world?
Well, I certainly agree. Social engineering, the human factor is really the weakest link in the chain, and unfortunately, you will always find somebody in a network that clicks that link or that opens that PDF, and it's very hard for us, security engineer or network administrator, to deal with that. You can't stop. You just have to train the people so that they are aware of the risk of opening unknown PDFs or clicking links from people that they don't know.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent, Gianni. Thank you so much for your time. It's very, very topical with Red October having been just discovered. So, clearly,
actually, there is the technical analysis. They just released, I think, 5 parts It's a technical analysis done by the lab, and I suggest it to them.
Absolutely. That's something which we'll put on the page. This is going to be an evergreen page, which will always keep online, so
Okay.
everyone can learn and really appreciate all of your work. Janny, thank you very, very much for your time. We really hope to get you back on very soon. So almost like for sort of updates, sort of what's going on in the world. And thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thanks, Janny.